Good afternoon. Welcome to the Promising Practices from Successful Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Networks Part 2. Thank you for being here to learn about this important issue. This is the third webinar in a series of 5 Wednesday webinars discussing approaches to combating elder financial exploitation. This webinar will be recorded and shared with registrants after today's session. For today's webinar, there are a number of pods in Adobe Connect that you may use. On the left side of the screen, you'll see the Q&A pod. Please add any content-related questions you have in there for our presenters, as we'll have a question and answer portion at the end of the webinar. Next to that, you'll see the EFPRN FAQs and links with important questions and also links to many of the resources that we'll reference. And finally, on the right, you'll see a chat where people are introducing themselves, where they're calling in from, and the organization that they are with. Feel free to introduce yourself there as well. I'd now like to welcome Jennifer Duane, the Program Manager of the Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Networks Program within the Office of Older Americans at the CFPB. Thank you, Jennifer, for starting today's session.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I'm going to start out with a big no mai, haere mai, kia ora koutou katoa. And that is in Maori, te reo Maori from New Zealand. And the reason I do that is to lead right into saying aloha to all of you, since we have our special guest from Hawaii today, and all of you from all throughout the United States. So welcome to Promising Practices from Successful Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Networks. This is part 2 of this particular segment. Nicole mentioned 3 parts. There was a initial presentation on an overview on networks and our new network tools. So when you receive the follow-up on this, you will see, if you weren't at the first 1 or 2, you'll see the first one in there. Moving forward, before I say another word, I should go over our disclaimer very quickly. This presentation is being made by a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau representative, that's me, on behalf of the Bureau. It does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice from the Bureau. Any opinions or views stated by me as the presenter are my own and may not represent the Bureau's views. The document here in the PowerPoint document includes links or references to third-party resources and third parties themselves. The inclusion of links or references to third-party sites does not necessarily reflect the Bureau's endorsement of the third party, the views expressed on the third-party site, or products and services offered by the third party or on their site. The Bureau has not vetted these third parties, their content, or any products or services they may offer. And last, there may be other possible entities or resources that are not listed that may also serve your needs. So today, I want to, first of all, I am Jennifer Duane. I am the Senior Program Analyst in the Office for Older Americans. I'm the lead on the Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Networks program. I also co-lead with our co-lead here, Lisa Schifferly. She's behind the scenes. She's a co-lead with me on the Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Network program, and she is also the lead on the Money Smart for Older Adults program, which is coming up soon for a training as part of the series, and I co-lead that program as well. And I've been with the Bureau since 2011, so it's been an absolutely wonderful adventure and professional pinnacle of my work in elder justice for the past 20 plus years to have the opportunity to work with the Office for Older Americans at the Bureau. And I also want to welcome Paul Greenwood, who will be moderating our panel, introducing the speakers and moderating the panel. Paul Greenwood, we've known each other for 20 years also. He's been around with us for quite some time. He's a retired deputy district attorney who was a lawyer in England initially for 13 years. And he relocated to San Diego in 1991, where he passed the California bar and then joined the San Diego County DA's office in 1993. So for 22 years, he headed up the Elder Abuse Prosecution Unit at the San Diego DA's office. And in 1999, California Lawyer Magazine named Paul one of their top 20 lawyers of the year in recognition of his pioneering efforts to pursue justice on behalf of older people. He has prosecuted over 750 cases of both physical, sexual, emotional, and financial elder abuse. He's also prosecuted 10 murder cases. In March 2018, Paul retired from the San Diego County DA's office to concentrate on sharing lessons he's learned from his work as an elder abuse prosecutor with a much wider audience, and we are so grateful. In October 2018, he was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by his former office, and he now spends much of his post-retirement time consulting on elder abuse cases and providing trainings to law enforcement and adult protective service agencies across the country and internationally. And he's also involved as a criminal justice board member at the National Adult Protective Services Association, which is also known as NAPSA. All right, so going forward, we're going to have a poll now. So what we'd like to hear from you, poll number 1. You've already got it, Lucky. There you go. Familiar with elder abuse, elder fraud prevention and response networks? Are you? Currently working with one? Yes, no, maybe? Familiar with elder fraud and prevention response networks, not working with one, or not familiar at all? And if you're not familiar at all, I want to give you a very, very special welcome and thank you. And while you're filling this out, I also just want to acknowledge the number of financial institution representatives we have here today. We really appreciate you stepping up and joining, and for all the work you do out there to protect your older account holders. And thank you for joining us today. I see a lot of familiar faces. And so the other poll we have going is, how would you best describe your organization? And look there, 52% of us here, of you, I should say, represent financial institutions, banks, or credit unions. Followed by, let's see, a close follow by others, 91. And then adult protective service folks. So thank you and welcome all. And then there is a third poll on here about were you at last week's presentation? And thank you, 68% of you were. Wonderful that you've returned. That's just superb. Thank you for all your answers. Are we static on the answers? Yes, thanks so much. All right, so we'll move forward. I just want to give a quick overview of the Office for Older Americans, CFPB, Office for Older Americans, and then we'll talk a little bit about networks, and then we'll get right into our presentation. So our mission, as you can see, is to regulate the offering and provision of consumer financial products and services. We are focused on enforcing federal consumer financial laws fairly and consistently. And in our particular area of the Bureau, in the Office for Older Americans, we seek to educate and empower consumers making financial decisions, as does the entire Bureau. And for the Office for Older Americans, our mission is helping protect older consumers from financial harm, and also helping older consumers make sound financial decisions at key moments as they age. And here is the direct link to our website, consumerfinance.gov/older Americans, where you'll find lots of resources and information to help you help others. And we thank you. A little bit of background. I want to focus on the third bullet point while you read 1 and 2. Elder fraud prevention response networks. There are hundreds across the country, possibly more, even 1,000 plus. Bring together key stakeholders like law enforcement, financial institutions, adult protective services, and other key stakeholders to fight elder financial exploitation. And how do they do this? Networks are a sustained and largely voluntary collaborative partnership working to prevent, detect, and or respond to elder financial exploitation. And we say that because networks tend to be sustained. They are not a one-time event or meeting. They tend to meet regularly, sometimes monthly, sometimes every other month, sometimes quarterly. These efforts are largely voluntary from formation to operation, which is an important distinction from mandated multidisciplinary teams or other similar interagency protocols. They are sometimes known as FAST, which is a financial abuse specialist team, coalition, task force, um, strategic alliance. We've seen elder justice alliances. We've seen elder justice leagues. So the one size fits all names for us in referring to all of you when you collaborate together to prevent elder financial exploitation is network. And we have a slide at the back that shows where to find that way. The best place to connect with one is to contact your local area agency on aging or AAA. You can also contact Adult Protective Services or Legal Aid. Or if all else fails, I suppose you could contact your local law enforcement agency or the district attorney's office. But this will be covered in greater detail towards the end. So now I am going to hand off to Mr. Paul Greenwood so he can take the rest of the show away. Paul?
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We have over 630 people online right now, which is phenomenal. And what is really encouraging is that in that poll, about 75% of you indicated that you were either familiar with networks and were not involved in one, or were not even familiar with networks. And that's exactly the audience that we're trying to reach, because we're hoping that by the end of this presentation, we will give you an appetite for wanting to seek out an existing network in your area, or if there is none, to have the courage to possibly start one. Because I have learned over the years that I was privileged to lead a prosecution team in the San Diego DA's office in fighting this increasing crime of elder abuse. I found that the greatest asset that I could tap into was networking with not only adult protective services or law enforcement, but also with my local banks, credit unions, with our mental health counselors, with our postal service, with our emergency room triage nurses. The list goes on. And whenever I would stand in front of a jury and deliver my opening statement, I was always conscious that this would not probably have been possible were it not for the fact that there had been a team of people who, at various points during the investigation and before the investigation, did what they should have done. They reported it, they collaborated, they communicated their information, and together we figured out a path to bring a case in front of a jury. And so I'm really looking forward to today's agenda, where we're going to go from our western shores of Hawaii and then over to Florida on the East Coast. We couldn't have got a more widespread geographic jurisdiction. And then we're going to hear from Jennifer again about some other resources that will be available to you. So if we can just put up the next, well, maybe I can do that, put up the next slide to show our presenters today. And after I briefly introduce Brian and Mary, I'm just going to give you one illustration of how networks work today from my own experience in the last few months with Hawaii. But we're just delighted that today we have with us Brian Ishikawa from the Bank of Hawaii. He is a senior vice president and director of corporate security there, and he's got over 20 years of experience in managing complex white-collar crime investigations and also providing consultation on security issues. So he's got a wealth of information and background, and he is one of the leading lights of the Hawaiian network of various folks. And with him today is Mary Gilmeister, who I've had the privilege of working with more closely over the last 2 or 3 years. And she is both president of MACHA and president of WACHA. And you say to yourself, what does MACHA mean? It stands for Mid-Atlantic Clearing House Association. WACHA stands for the Wisconsin Automated Clearing House Association. And Mary is a leading expert and authority on electronic payments. Anything you want to know about how electronic payments work or connecting with various people who are involved in electronic payments, this is your go-to person. And that brings me to the little story I wanted to share with you from Hawaii. I had appeared in front of one particular judge in San Diego many times, who obviously knew that I was an elder abuse prosecutor. She retired to the Big Island with her husband, who was also a former judge who knew me. Well, one Saturday night, this retired judge contacted me and said, Paul, I have a dear, dear friend on the Big Island who I've just discovered is a victim of over $170,000 worth of a scam. Is there any way that you could possibly help her? So I contacted this lady, and a very articulate, intelligent lady, and bless her heart, she had been indeed totally defrauded by the Amazon scam and had lost over $170,000. She had wired it from her mainland bank to another big bank. And so I immediately contacted Mary and Jennifer. Mary introduced me to two of her contacts within the banking industry who represented the two banks that were involved in these wire transfers. And ultimately, we were able to track where the money went. I was able to then bring in an investigator from the West Coast, from a particular DA's county where the money had been deposited. We were then able to trace some of the other money. And some of the good news is that ultimately, one of the banks froze the account of the money mule into which account my victim's money was being sent. And she was able to get back $38,000. And that, as you probably know, is very unusual, but it would not have happened were it not for the inner networking that I was able to benefit from. So I want you to strap in your seats. I want you to fly with me now across the ocean. I want you to feel those tropical breezes coming out of Oahu. And I'm just going to now welcome Brian and Mary. Aloha, and take it from here, will you please?
Thank you very much, Paul and Jennifer, and aloha, everyone. And today we're going to talk about what we did in Hawaii and how the network worked. Really, it was to build collaboration and to protect older people from elder financial exploitation and to work together as a network. We had many different retreat partners, including the Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Network. We had the CFPB. We had a great group of people, and we all are concerned about, we've heard examples, we've witnessed examples, or maybe even a family member has become a victim. We have run 2 retreats so far, and both of them have been virtual, which have been great because we could involve all the islands and everyone could participate from all the islands as well. So we had a steering committee, and this steering committee, we met monthly. Then we met every other week. It was a great working group of individuals. We had the Hawaii Credit Union League, we had the Bankers Association, and we had Bank of Hawaii, and we had a National Adult Protective Services. We had a lot of great discussion, and you can see the steering committee organizations that were represented. And we really put a great program together of the actual networking. These were over the participating organizations. We had, I think, over 250 participating organizations throughout all the islands, and all the different agencies represented throughout the islands, including like the County of Kauai Agency on Elder Affairs. We had National Adult Protective Services from Maui. We had financial institutions. So it really was a great representation of the actual networking that need to be completed. And you can see the list here. So what we did was we felt the needs might be different by the counties. So we broke everyone out into groups and we based it by the county. We looked at case review and resolution. We looked at community education and outreach. And what you will find is that Hawaii is a great networking with the islands and the culture that Hawaii brings to their kapuna. Legal aid and victim assistance. We had cross-training and resource sharing and local and regional protocols. So what did we learn through those breakout sessions is that you can never have enough multidisciplinary information and sharing. What does the police department need? What do emergency responders need and how they can address those areas? Financial institution. So it was a great collaboration and a successful protection of elder being financially abused. A lot of our participants felt it was very informative and loved other agencies and sharing their perspective on how to continue to collaborate. And also there was a need for streamlining assistance between law enforcement and financial institution. Some indicated we need more funding grants, and they also learned about a lot of new resources that could be used to help seniors regarding fraud and abuse. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian because Brian is very knowledgeable about the islands and establishing the networks and how critically it is for a community effort and culturally in one of the events that we had. So Brian, I'm going to have you go through this and explain it.
Thank you, Mary. Aloha, folks. During the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, otherwise known as WEAD, a well-known local Hawaiian reverend rendered a prayer at the start of the event. The Hawaiian term pule vehe equates to an opening prayer that is performed out of respect and is done to set the intentions of the good endeavor that is about to take place. Although a religious aspect might be seen as out of order, in another part of the U.S., it is culturally acceptable here in Hawaii. Also, the specific reverend who provided the prayer was heavily involved in the elder services community. The closing remarks were provided by Kealoha Takahashi, who is the Executive Office on Aging, County of Kauai's Agency on Elderly Affairs, and she provided a quote that rendered with the participants. She essentially said, "We need to move forward and break down the barriers we've built over the years." What participants enjoyed the most was created into sort of a collage here. And essentially you can see the largest words here: collaboration, networking, sharing, and whatnot are key there.
Brian, and I also just would like to comment that this group for Hawaii, we get together at least once a year in many, events to continue working on the network. We hold it virtually again so that all the islands can participate.
Thank you, Mary. I chair a group called HAFISO. It's called the Hawaii Association of Financial Institution Security Officers. I know that's a very long word or term, but folks just refer to it as HAFISO. It's a collaborative group of financial institutions, both banks as well as credit unions, security practitioners, law enforcement entities, and other valuable partners. Mary is one of those partners as well. We meet every month, every third Wednesday of each month virtually. And we meet to discuss financial fraud schemes, trending in security incidents, and at times even discuss openly different suspects or organized crime groups that are unfortunately prevalent in our community. The meeting consists of a virtual roundtable type of discussion and sharing of information. We periodically have a speaker or two, usually a party within the group that wants to provide focus of a certain incident that took place or a new form of law enforcement or prosecutorial strategy. And occasionally, the guest speaker will tend to start prior to our normal roundtable discussion. These are some of the participants that meet in our monthly meeting. And by the way, I must tell you that right now, at the same time here in Hawaii, that Hafiso group is meeting, and somebody else is doing me a favor and chairing the group today. But these are just some of the participants that are involved. You'll notice banks, credit unions, you'll see both local as well as state and federal law enforcement agencies as well as partners. So allow me to share with you the benefits of networks from a bank's perspective or from my perspective. I've been managing and chairing this Hafiso group for approximately 15 years now, and our participant listing has grown to more than 200, and monthly meeting participation is now often in the 70 to 90 count of participants. From a banker's perspective, the following are benefits of a networking group. The opportunity to collaborate with other financial institution contacts, relationship building before a critical event is very important. Networking with law enforcement and other valued partners. Similarly, establishing ties and knowing who representatives are from different agencies is important prior to an incident's occurrence. As a participant of the network, being able to make an inquiry with others on best practices or benchmarking and to learn of new fraud trends and schemes is vital as it relates to intelligence purposes. Improving the coordination, including the use of agency and community resources, is of high value to group participants as well. The 4 key factors for a networking group to be successful and of value to its participants, in my opinion, are a group tied to a simple and common goal, or what I call strategic intent, of sharing information, either on specific fraud trends, it could be actors, the suspect and suspect entities, and a willingness to help others within the group. An important element to foster is the strong willingness of participants to share and to help each other. Each participant should be strongly encouraged to share with others or make an inquiry with the group or a best practice or what others are experiencing with a certain issue. Networking groups are only as good as the willingness of the group to share. Everyone wants to get something out of participating in a group, but participation is a key factor of a successful working group. So creating an environment that folks are willing and feel comfortable in sharing is vital. Ease of participation. We are now doing meetings virtually, so it is convenient and allows for participation across our island state. In addition, participation in the group is free. Sometimes some businesses or potential participants do not have a budget to fund networking type groups. And lastly, group diversity and trust. Having a wide spectrum of participants from different organizations is a key factor that will entice other future participants to join the group and or to decide to participate in meetings. We all have competing tasks and endeavors, And sometimes we need to make that tough decision to determine which we will do. Having enough of a participant base representing a wide variety of organizations will increase the plausibility for success. Trust is also a key element to any group dynamic. Trying to create an atmosphere that incorporates trust will allow others to feel that they can openly share, inquire about the experience of others, and network with the group members successfully. I thank you for allowing Mary and I to share a bit about successful networks. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Brian and Mary. And after we hear from our friends from Florida, I'm asking you please to, in fact, be thinking of your questions now, and please put your questions in the Q&A box that you see on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. And we will then form a panel with all 4 speakers for you to ask those questions and for me to moderate. So don't be shy, and please ask. There's no silly question. Ask whatever you'd like. So now we're going to travel over 4,700 miles east to Gainesville in Florida, where we're delighted to have with us 2 ladies from Elder Options. And Elder Options is the Area Agency on Aging, which serves 16 counties in the North Central Florida region. Amy Thomas is currently the Director of Community Care Coordination for Elder Options. And Leslie Andrews is the Elder Abuse Project Coordinator. And looking at their mission statement, I love this statement that is on the website. Elder Options ensures that communities have a trusted and unbiased place to turn to for information, resources, and assistance, which I think is a perfect segue into thinking about the benefits of networking. So welcome, Amy and Leslie, and please take it from here.
Well, thank you, Paul, for the introduction. My name is Amy Thomas, and I'll be joined today, as you heard, by Leslie. And we are planning to share some information about the network that we support here in the North Central Florida region. So we are, as Paul mentioned, we are the Area Agency on Aging and Aging and Disability Resource Center for the North Central Florida region. And we help support what we refer to as the Senior Advocacy Network for North Central Florida. That is our group that has evolved to support the elder exploitation. And our group began in 2017 with the guidance and support from the Office of, and many people here on this call, from the Office of Financial Protection for Older Americans. And so they came to help support a number of advocates in the community that had been interested in coming together to be able to respond to exploitation of our older and aging adults. We organized around the education and awareness, kind of taking a prevention perspective on emerging issues and what folks were doing and bringing to the table and resources that they were able to offer. We created a listserv group, a Google group actually, that has served to be very valuable in communicating, and an archive of much of the information that is shared between members. So we can reference all the way back to the beginning, membership and communications and resources and training opportunities that have come up. It's served very useful to be able to moderate that through Google groups. So I would recommend that. The group also provides community trainings frequently, typically every other month, open to the community, professionals, the general community, anyone who's interested, through the bi-monthly training events. And that has also served as an entry point into the network more formally. So as we've offered community trainings and invited speakers and reached out to other community groups. So we have gained membership through that interaction with the network in order to get people who are interested in making a commitment to the group. And then, of course, the major part of it is the networking. So by inviting all of these community folks to the training events that we are offering and opening it up to broad members of the community, we've been able to create frequent networking events virtually as well as in person for people to spend time together to be able to, share news, what's going on in the community, what we're hearing about, the ongoing projects that different stakeholders are working on, and what their interests might be for future training or future opportunities to be able to bring more education to the community. From there, from the network that was created, subgroups and committees evolved from this in order to be able to focus on particular concerns that might be coming up or respond to particular things or advocate for particular things. So, and we'll talk about what some of those groups ended up focusing on in a minute. All this group is volunteer based. It's all in kind, and we serve currently as kind of the administrative support to the group to kind of help with the coordination of that piece. So our main network partners is open to anyone, individual or organization who is interested in education and advocacy for elder justice. And so the partners that evolved, the core group that began this, happened to be a very passionate group of attorneys. And so the state's attorneys been very involved, a lot of community legal service providers, individual elder law attorneys, the Florida Bar Association, a very strong presence from attorneys who were needing opportunities to connect with other community partners in order to be able to respond to the exploitation that they were seeing. So they were those core people that began, along with some community advocates, and particularly several seniors. So we had several community advocates focused on seniors and the seniors themselves that were engaged in this process. Several state agencies were represented, and the Department of Elder Affairs, very instrumental, the Department of Children and Families, which houses our Adult Protective Services, Office of Inspector General, many community agencies. Law enforcement was represented through several different law enforcement agencies throughout the region that we covered. Our university partnership with the University of Florida, they are involved with research related to exploitation, as well as some direct services related to victims of abuse. We have many banking partners that have been engaged and informative and very active in the group as well. And then, of course, any aging services providers, community advocates, and individual influencers in the community who are passionate about the issue and are able to advocate and share with others are always involved. There's no, we kind of take a grassroots approach. And so many of we don't necessarily have a formal structure as some networks would be, but we are able to welcome anyone who has interest and find a spot for them for training on the group, participation, and certainly include them on our Google group and listserv for that. Some of the strengths of that was having a very active core membership. Our membership right now is well over 100 folks that are representing either themselves individually or the community group that they're attached to. But there is a core active group that can really drive that change and that keeps people interested and keeps people motivated and coming back. So, that group is also able to help us all stay focused and kind of breaking down what sometimes seems like the impossible task of ending exploitation, but are able to break it down into some of those action steps where our outcomes were achievable. And of course, the networking piece is probably the most valued being able to connect with people formally and informally around any particular issues that are coming up, and having easy access to those folks. Some of the accomplishments that came from the group, which were mainly driven by some of the subgroups out of it, was an advocacy related to passing a law in Florida that allows for an injunction against exploitation of vulnerable adults. And what that injunction was able to do is modeled very much after domestic violence injunctions, which allows for a temporary injunction to identify and remove the exploiter by keeping their distance, by freezing accounts of a vulnerable adult temporarily, or lines of credit, things like that. So it helps stop that cycle quickly, in order for there to be time to be able to deal with what needs might come up, such as guardianship or things like that. So and the adult themselves can also request these injunctions, so it makes it much more accessible for an emergency response. The group was also able to create and respond to a grant award from the Office of Violence Against Women, which has allowed us to support being able to respond not only to exploitation, but other forms of abuse in the aging population as well. But it reinforces our ability to be able to help coordinate and support exploitation as well. And that funding has been is on year 4 now, and has been able to be renewed. So we're incredibly grateful for the support that network brought to the table in order to accomplish that. They had a workshop. One of their focuses around training particularly was bringing together and helping folks understand more around adult protective services and what their needs were, how community can participate in that, what was the abuse process like, particularly as it relates to exploitation, because there's some nuances involved there. And that evolved also into a statewide conference that the group was able to sponsor and bring speakers in from both law enforcement, from the government, from politicians, other attorneys, all focused on where can we go from here? What needs do we have? What should kind of resources do we need to influence in terms of bringing advocacy? And another unique thing that came out of this was a work group that was focused on healthcare surrogacy, what we refer to as solo seniors, those seniors who are by themselves and may not have access to family or friends, but need help and assistance with healthcare decision making, and are interested in partnering with someone who could be an advocate for them. This work is still ongoing. So that's one of the things that we're focused on now, but had several community partners who were working to participate in that. And so it's a brief overview about what the network has done, who's involved in that, and the partnerships, but and some of the strengths and accomplishments that have come out of that. And Leslie, I'm going to hand it over to. She's going to talk about some of the challenges and where we go from here.
Hello, everyone. Leslie Andrews here, and I'm about to speak about some of the challenges that we've had here. So, COVID changed everything, and due to COVID-19, restrictions were put in place, and it changed the dynamic of how we lived our daily lives. Individuals began following stay-at-home or quarantine directives, and many operations switched to a virtual platform, with our senior advocacy network being one of those who had to undergo that transition to a remote model. During that transition, in response to COVID-19, some of the advocacy priorities of the group shifted. The focus of the group was then redirected to matters such as nursing home care practices, access to appropriate care, and access for families during that lockdown. In addition to that, we also seen an increase in isolation due to COVID practices, and also an increase in scams and fraud. And also, since 2020, we have underwent a few changes in chair positions, with one of our founding members going into retirement. And due to some of those changes, we did see an evolving membership. So the next steps of the group is going to be reestablishing the rally cry for a passionate purpose. And that purpose for actionable change is going to be redirected back at some of the financial exploitation pieces. Specifically, the group has focused on nursing home debt collection practices. And we are projecting through that rally cry that there will be an increase in member recruitment and engagement of former active members.
So thanks, Leslie. And just to wrap it up, this is just an example of how our group looks and how it evolves. I've talked to some other groups and heard from other groups and have learned that there are, all kinds of different ways to be able to implement these practices. So, but thank you for the opportunity to be able to share our experience.
Well, thank you so much to you both for that. Some great thought-provoking ideas and benefits from networking. There's one, before I invite the whole panel to get on, maybe on video, so we can take some questions. There is one question specifically to Florida, which I'm not sure if you can answer this. Somebody has asked if there are any organizations like yours or other nonprofits that provide assistance to the Treasure Coast in Florida. First of all, can you let us know where the Treasure Coast is? And do you know of any other similar organizations that have networks there?
Sure. So I do know where the Treasure Coast region is. Treasure Coast is often going to say the Vero Beach kind of area, which is the east southern-ish portion of the state, not all the way south, but and that I do not know of a particular group in that area.
Okay.
Jennifer here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Jennifer, carry on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that, for all the presentations there. I'm trying to remember the name of the county that Treasure Coast is in. There's Broward is on the other side, but it's where Boca Raton is. There is an area agency on aging there that's very large that serves the Treasure Coast. And they do or did, I don't know for sure right now, but they have had a very dynamic network and sort of a victim assistance program there. I will try to look it up while we're, I'll just, when I stop talking here, I'll go look it up and I will post a link to a contact or to the area agency on aging in that county, and you can give them a ring, and hopefully they're still working. They were really robust a couple of years ago, and so I'll follow up with you on that in the chat.
Thank you, Jennifer. And in fact, Lisa has put into the messaging here that the Vero and South is in Palm Beach.
Yes,
and has provided a link. So thank you for that.
That's the one. Thanks, Lisa.
And in fact, just as a follow-up, there was another question about, well, how can we find out if there is an existing network? And one of the best places to go to is if you go to the Department of Justice website. It's called Elder Justice Initiative, okay, EJI, Elder Justice Initiative. And when you get to that, you will find that there's a network locator map, and you can also filter it by states. Now, we're not saying that this is a fully comprehensive resource, but at least it's a start. So you may find information specifically about your jurisdiction, but if it's not there, do not assume that there is no such network. Maybe by contacting your local adult protective services or your area agency on aging network, you could then get that information also. But that would certainly be a good starting point. So it's the Elder Justice Initiative from the DOJ website. When I started out prosecuting these kind of cases in 1996, there were no such resources available. It's just phenomenal how this has just exploded over the last, particularly 5 years or so. So don't be afraid to Google and tap into so many resources out there that are available to us. In fact, somebody has asked a question about, well, is there a library that we can go to for resources to maybe show a video at a meeting? And, there are, again, various resources. And I think there's one that was given to us through your consumerfinance.gov website, which is in the question and answer page. But also you could just go to YouTube and type in elder financial exploitation. And you've got to be a little discriminatory about which ones to click on. But there's some very good resources out there from recognized agencies like CFPB and such like. And I must also put in a plug for AARP, Fraud Watch Network. You don't have to be a member to take advantage of AARP Fraud Watch Network. And one of the benefits that they are offering is a counseling service for any victims of elder financial exploitation who can dial in and talk to a person who's going to be very empathetic and will not be judgmental or in any way saying, how could you have done this? They will listen. They will probably be able to offer them resources and at least help the victim feel that somebody understands where they're coming from. So please also take advantage of AARP Fraud Watch Network. Okay, so I'd like to invite the four speakers to come on board with me for more of a panel discussion. And I'm going to throw this one out there and ask for any of you to respond. It comes from Michelle. She says, where can I find topics for discussion at our MDT meetings? And also, where can
I think we may have momentarily lost Paul. We'll get him back connected. If the video is pushing on the bandwidth a little bit, we can pivot. But I think opening that question was asking about locating and working with multidisciplinary teams, if anyone wants to take that one.
Thank you.
Jennifer and Paul, I can chime in.
Great.
I have two things to share in relation to finding topics that are suitable for a network group to discuss. The first off is taking a poll of all the members. And if your membership is or participation group is really large, perhaps you can check in with maybe primary members or parties that frequently visit, and participate in meetings and see what they're interested in, what topics they have that they're dying to know about. From my perspective, a ton of our participants always want to know what other banks or credit unions are doing to address a certain problem, or what trends, what are their top 3 to 5 security incidents or fraud risk incidents that they see popping up again and again the last few months, to, hey, who's sharing and doing elder financial exploitation training to clients and community-based groups, and what do those training materials look like, right? So polling groups is one thing. The second thing I'd say is, hey, what are you personally interested in yourself from getting out of this group? And for me, there's always a topic that pops up. It could be elder financial exploitation directly related, or it could be, lately it's been our vagrant situation with having just a problem with vagrants showing up in branches and not just panhandling, but leaving messes behind, being violent to our staff and impacting our clients as well. And so if I'm interested in that topic, I'm sure if I engage with others on that topic, just creating a list of those sorts of topics, I think is a good idea. And you'll be bound to create some dynamic conversations.
And I would like to add to that as well, is that I'm one of 10 payment associations, and we have worked very closely with CFPB and our member financial institutions that we also will do training, whether that be in person or via a webinar. And you can reach out to me if you're looking for a payment association in your area, for sure. And, we're more than willing to help and also help develop the networks in certain areas.
Paul, Jennifer here. I wanted to pipe up on that if I could. I'm keeping my camera off. I apologize. I've been bumped off once already. Our network is a little unreliable at the moment. So thanks, Mary and Brian, both, and Paul. That question was great from the group. I mentioned our elder consumerfinance.gov /elder networks. And I've actually just popped it into the chat. I'll hit return, and there it is for you. We have a networks guide, which I was going to talk about afterwards for a few minutes, but there's a network development guide that has been just updated and enhanced with, streamlined. And there are a number of downloadable tools or resources within that guide. And one of those is a list of topics that you can offer to your network, training topics, different types of stakeholders you may want to invite that you may not have thought of. We call it a stakeholder spotlight. But what Mary said there was what really triggered me in a great way, is that just what is a payments association? What are payments? What's a payment system? In my experience, most elder justice advocates, being law enforcement, social services, senior services, other than bankers, do not know what a payment system is and how important payments are to preventing fraud and stopping transactions, and how important payment professionals are to have connected with your network. As a part of the banking industry, they're just really pretty unknown. And Mary and a number of her colleagues have been really instrumental. There's a National Association of ACH Providers. NACHA has been wading in pretty steadily to this issue, and payments associations around the country have been. Mary's been a real leader, having supported the startup of the network in Hawaii, or networks, I should say, one of the networks. And so anyway, I just wanted to alert you to the list of topics, training topics. It's in the development guide, potential training topics. It covers a wide spectrum of options from, not just banking industry topics. But anyway, that's all for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. In fact, I'm wondering, we have a question again for Florida, Amy and Leslie. Somebody would like to know if there's similar organizations in Central Florida where there's a large Hispanic population.
Again, with the Area Agency on Aging, yes, the Area Agency on Aging would be coordinating the abuse piece there. As far as the actual group that might be focused on the network piece for the exploitation, I too would need to look that up. So.
But I think you've already volunteered your email address, Amy. So if they want to follow up with you, they can do that.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that very much. This next question applies to all of you, and I'd like to get your input on this. Leslie has written this. She said, I think our biggest hurdle is that most clients know they won't get their money back. So they think, why even report it? Leslie says, I see the benefits in letting the community know, but how do you get people who are ashamed and depressed to report it? How can we improve the amounts of money that elders get back after they have been scammed? Who'd like to start that off?
Well, I can start off in terms of how to get people to report it. And it is never ending education. You can never hear it often enough. that it is okay to report, that it happens, that it can happen to anyone. It can happen to you. And so you have to report. And we just have to keep saying it. There's really no way to make it less scary until we're all able to talk about it openly. And I've received many calls just from folks in the community. A recent one was someone I never ever would have expected who would have been a victim of a crime. And the only reason that he called me is because he saw me in the community and he thought that he had an opportunity that there was one person that was going to listen. And that is all it takes. As far as the response piece, I think in being able to recover, we have lots of challenges, but we all have a responsibility in the community to reach out to one another in order to perpetuate those responses, because it's complex. There are multi agencies that have to be involved, with banks and law enforcement and protective investigations and social workers and mental health therapists. I mean, there are so many people at the table who want to respond, but we have to continue to network in order to be able to make those connections happen, because it's so complex.
And Paul, I will also comment to that. I think it's really critical to work with the financial institution. The financial institution will have access to their records. That is important information, and the reporting from financial institution on the receiving side as well as on the sending side has really improved, and they are trying to put in more controls to monitor these types of schemes that are taking, they're taking the elderly's funds. And I think the sooner we find out about it, like Paul indicated, we were really lucky to get $38,000 back. And you should maybe use that as an example that you're not always going to get it back. You may get some, but every little bit helps in this particular case.
That's so true, Mary. And in fact, one of the key lessons I learned from that networking experience with the victim in the Big Island is getting a letter of indemnity signed between the two banks that were involved with the transfer of monies. And the one bank agreed to freeze monies of what I'll call the suspect account, which happened to be the money mule, and then pass that back over to the victim's mainland bank. Brian, do you want to follow up on what Mary's comments about the benefits of involving financial institutions and how you have discussions with your own victim, your own customer, about overcoming the feelings of embarrassment and denial?
Sure. Both Amy and Mary touched upon some excellent matters there. We're noticing a lot of seniors being, like you said, embarrassed about their situation. And so they may not always report it to law enforcement or seek other assistance. And in our state, we have a mandatory reporting of suspected elder abuse by financial institutions. And so perhaps too often, we're making that initial police report or contact to our Adult Protective Services agency here. And then we're hearing that prior, those entities were unaware of this victimization. And that client, even at times, has stated they made a police report, but we find out they never did. And it's probably because they're embarrassed about their situation. And so I think the tie-in to financial institutions is very important, but the educational piece as well is important. We need to constantly educate both our clients and community groups, but provide internal training for our staff so that they can recognize red flags of potential elder exploitation as well.
Thank you. Leslie and Amy, do you want to follow up with any of that?
We've had the opportunity to work and bring with law enforcement as well as attorneys to the table in partnership with our banks. And having the opportunity to communicate with them helps provide us the education and other advocates that are interacting with the seniors directly some confidence in being able to help advise them with how to respond and who to engage along with our interaction with them, and that goes a long way to creating a feeling of safety so that people can take the action that's needed and the persistence that's sometimes needed in order to move through the processes that can help these older adults.
Thank you. I was pleased to see, Amy and Leslie, that in your network, you got a good response from state prosecutors, county prosecutors' offices, as well as law enforcement. So this question is a follow-up to that, but to all of you as well, but starting with Florida. What have you seen to be some of the benefits from the networking to be able to overcome previous misconceptions that maybe law enforcement or prosecutors had about even taking on these kinds of reports and cases of elder financial exploitation? For example, I used to deal with the misconception, well, the crime didn't occur here. It's not in our jurisdiction. Or there's no point in following because the money's already gone, the suspect is overseas, so we'll have no chance in identifying who it is. So were you able through your networking to overcome that kind of misconception?
Well, I would start by saying I don't think we're ever done, right? Because there's an opportunity to continue to educate and to share information, because there's natural transitions with folks that are coming in and out of the communities. But I think what's been most valuable has been the very active membership of the elder law attorneys and advocates with the justice backgrounds. We have former judges, we have current judges, we have people who can help speak the language that Leslie and I might not be able to speak, because we aren't the attorneys or the prosecutors. We see the need. So and often are asking the questions about what can we do here. But by having the prosecutors, the state's attorneys, and elder justice attorneys at the table, they are thankfully able to provide the more technical education to the other experts that we're coordinating with. So I would say that, including them at the table and on the conversations is the best way to go.
Anyone else? Well, Amy, you triggered another question from me, which is I'm delighted and actually surprised to hear that you've got judges in your network. How on earth do you manage to bring in judges who supposedly have to keep their total independence and stay clear of all of people like us? What's the magic formula in Florida?
Well, I'm going to have to say that I didn't bring them to the table. So the former, I think, is the key in that case, but they are people who are interested, particularly on the training side of things, the awareness, right? So understanding, it gives them a clue as to what's going on in the community, as well as being able to highlight for us some of the issues that they're seeing. But again, I think that comes back to their engagement is because of their, the number of, attorneys and attorney-related professions that have been present with our particular group has what's facilitated that, because there's a trust and an expertise and again, a language that I can't always speak that is there.
It reminds me of a judge that I met many years ago in Northern California, who actually started a network from her courtroom. She was developing an elder justice courtroom, so she'd handled civil and criminal cases. And her success in bringing people to her chambers at lunchtime, she made a homemade Chinese chicken salad. And the word spread public defenders, prosecutors, law enforcement, they lined up to sample her Chinese chicken salad. So that leads me to another question. What is one thing that your networks have been able to achieve to attract more members, to make it a more diverse group? Brian, can I start with you? What does your network use to attract new, interesting members?
I think the fact that we're free gets around through word of mouth quite a bit, and we've stayed consistent with the same meeting date, sort of every third Wednesday of each month at 9 a.m. And when we moved in the pandemic, we only missed 2 meetings, by the way, and we moved to a virtual environment. I think that was also the key because our participation actually grew during the pandemic, and the having to not drive to a meeting, I think, made a big difference for us, especially in our island state. Right, folks didn't have to travel or fly at all.
Anyone else?
I would say similarly for us, it's been consistent meeting time, whether it was in person or virtual. And the community training piece, opening it up where our membership network is able to kind of share with the rest of their connections, and focusing, being able to ask sometimes some of those people that we have interest in to present, then also expands the network, because we ask a particular bank to come, or we ask a particular individual to come, they expand their network, and more people are like, oh, I need to connect with some other folks. But within the group, I think that's been valuable with law enforcement. So Leslie and I have access to law enforcement through our other work, because we do a lot of training with law enforcement around abuse and neglect. And so have been able to encourage more law enforcement participation, presence in the groups, and engage them so that they understand and have more knowledge and comfort with their role in the process.
Paul,
Yeah, and I think like the Hafiza group is a perfect example where we bring in everybody and the word starts to get around. It's free and everybody is willing to have people contact them. We've had Jennifer participate in that group, and that has been very beneficial. So Brian and I speak a lot to the other networks and other payment associations. So there is help and we're there for you. And I know there was something in the chat of how do I get more branches involved. I put in my contact information. If you want to email me, and I'll look at your location and I'll put you in contact with a payment association. I just think the networking is so, so critical.
And Paul, I was going to mention something as an add-on to this. In a couple of weeks, next week there'll be a different presentation, but the week after that will be a walk through the Money Smart for Older Adults program. And of course, AARP has its fabulous Fraud Watch program as well. But one way that networks seem to come together very well in my 20 years of working with networks is through collaboration around community education and public awareness. And because it's just really, everybody feels the same about it. It's not a heavy lift except for the time involved in getting out there. But the Money Smart for Older Adults program, and I'm sort of self-promoting a resource, but it is an FDIC CFPB collaboration resource. It's a plug and play, turnkey curriculum on preventing frauds and scams on a lot of different topics. It's very easy to use, and it gives an opportunity for say financial institutions and APS to go out and present together, or law enforcement and APS to present together, or legal services and financial institutions just get together and present, or have a speakers bureau as part of your network to help build membership. We'll give you more information about the program. later, but it does have an instructor guide. It has a resource guide in 14-point font that seniors love, older people love. I love it. 14-point font's good for me too. And it also has a PowerPoint, and it's a lot of material, but you can break it up into pieces and offer, regular, say, a series of topics over time. You can use it at your network meetings as a featured topic. And you can also, look at your collaboration, I think, hopefully in the spotlight, the stakeholder spotlight that is in the network development guide. You will see other partners, potential partners like libraries or librarians who have space and who see lots of older people and who are usually have very accessible buildings, and they love to collaborate, and they need materials that you have locally to share with older patrons or caregivers that come in looking for information about powers of attorney or fiduciary topics like how to be a trustee or whatnot. So, broaden your visions in terms of who our collaboration partners can be. In Northern Michigan, we saw a reference librarian actually help run a network. Was an actual coordinator of a network because she had the time and she had the passion, and they needed the help, and so and she was very instrumental. So I think in being innovative and looking for ways to engage partners that is satisfying, and it's not the heavy lift of having to plan legislation or set up victim witness assistance programs or having to like the regional protocols. All that is great work, but it takes time and it takes specific expertise. And sometimes a good place to start, or a great place to just recruit and get momentum in the community and build response and build also reports and build trust with older people you meet with, is to just simply do community education and outreach and get yourselves out there, so that, because one person will know 10 people. So if someone has a friend who's being ripped off, or a fellow resident that's being ripped off, they might say, hey, I saw somebody at a meeting or at a church group last week, or wherever you were. Why don't you give them a call and see if they can help you? And we've seen a lot of benefit from that. And also, I'm just going to top it off by saying, look ahead now towards Older Americans Month in May, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. These could be great opportunities to find symbiotic relationships, to get with your area agency on aging, find out what they're planning and plug in. And then you'll find a network if there is one. And if there isn't, you can perhaps start talking to people about developing one. Thank you.
And Jennifer, I must tell you, just yesterday, UPS delivered a whole box full of these for me. So I got them. Oh man, it was like Christmas all over again. I got so many. So feel free, everybody, to contact CFPB. It's just tremendous resources. So I'm looking forward to learning more about the instructor guide and hopefully sharing that information. So thank you, CFPB. We've just got about a couple of minutes left before we hand back to Jennifer to talk more about resources. Is there any final closing remarks that any of you would like to give about the benefits of networking and getting people excited to join one?
I would say if someone is looking to join one, go for it. What's stopping you? There's only benefit to the relationship building that can happen. If you're looking to start one, it just takes a couple of people that really have the influence and the passion. Then that's what has made our group so amazing, is that having a core. Not everybody has to be fully engaged all of the time, but it spreads, right? When you have those passionate few that have the energy to kick it off. So have the courage. I'm glad our group did.
And I would also agree, think that's a great start. Don't hesitate to reach out to your resources. They're critical and they're available, and you can feel free to call any one of us, I'm sure. that we have started. And a lot of this all started because of Jennifer and CFPB and getting Paul Greenwood involved as well. We have had great success and have grown, and I just can't, it's something I think we're all passionate about, and that passion carries forward.
Leslie?
Yes, and I will just second to all of that. Absolutely. One of the most important part is finding those members with the passion. And once you get all the right people together in the same place, really great things can happen. And we've seen that.
Perfect. And
So,
Brian, thank you. And Brian, the final word.
I think it's looking at sort of inwardly initially, saying, well, what's in it for me? What would I want to get out of this network? And then try to duplicate that for everybody else and find something positive for every member to try to get out of it. And in reality, you're going to notice some essentially a symbiotic relationship with each other, all having the same sort of similar or common goals of what they want out of this sort of group.
Terrific. Well, I can't thank you enough, Amy, Leslie, Brian, and Mary, for your participation and for your willingness to share the information that you've learned with a wider audience as well. You know, one thing I learned early on in my path of prosecuting these cases was getting the word out there, and sometimes teaming up with an advertising agency that is willing to do a pro bono campaign. And that was one thing that really I was so thankful for, that an advertising agency came forward to me and they created this campaign called Silence Isn't Golden. And they used gold for silence, they used red for physical abuse, green for financial abuse, and blue for neglect. And we put these posters everywhere in our county. And it really helped the public to understand that there is a place to go to. There is somebody who will listen to them through Adult Protective Services and then law enforcement. So it's just about getting the word out and networking and learning from one another, and hopefully kind of bringing down some of these barriers that often are there with individual agencies. So thank you so much, everybody. And now I'm just going to hand back to Jennifer to share some resources with us. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Paul and everyone. Okay, while this is coming up, so we've seen this, but I just want to stick with it for a moment, Nicole, before I move forward. I just want to clarify that the DOJ Elder Justice Network locator there at the top, it's an excellent resource. However, as Paul said, it is not exhaustive of every network in the country. And in fact, they have a sort of a restriction on membership or listing the different networks on there. They have to be run by a government agency. And there are a lot of networks out there that are ad hoc groups that don't, some may not even have a website or a particular organization. As I said, they can be very voluntary and kind of spontaneous groups of passionate people who come together. So the Area Agency on Aging and that eldercare.acl.gov is actually a national database of area agencies on aging. So all you have to do is go to that. And you can do this if you want to report elder financial exploitation or if you want to share a national resource for reporting. You go in and you just plug in your zip code, and it'll take you to your local area agency on aging. So if you're in the Treasure Coast, put in your zip code and your local area agency on aging will come up. You scroll down to elder abuse, and that should get you in touch with either some contact or maybe a network. I'm not sure exactly how they list themselves, but those both are really great resources. And then the starting, I wanted to mention that not last week, but the week before, we kicked off this series of webinars with a walk through the network development guide with all of the tools and resources that I mentioned, the new ones. And it gives you, there's actually a recording of it. So when you receive the follow-up email for today, you will see the previous sessions listed, and there are links to the videos for today, for last week and the week before, which if you see lower right-hand corner there, connect your community's efforts to prevent and respond to elder financial exploitation. That is our network development guide at consumerfinance.gov/elder networks. And there is a walkthrough of the guide provided in the first of these 5 sessions. So you may already have that link. And if you haven't already seen it, I think that's a really good, helpful tool or resource to see the guide and get a walkthrough orientation to it. All right, let's move on here. I know we all want to wrap up on time. Last poll. Brian touched on this. Several of you touched on this. Oh, yes. Love to see that one zoom up. So I just want to say while you're doing this, before COVID, BC as I refer to it, we had a recommendation from a study we did on networks in 2016, which you can also find a link to in the Network Development Guide if you're interested in knowing more about networks. We did a study of them. And one of the recommendations that came out was the use of technology, a recommendation to use technology, increase the use of technology for networking. And that was actually inspired by 2 networks in Hawaii, one that I believe was in Oahu, speaking a little bit of Maori, a little bit of Hawaiian, I get a little mixed up sometime. And also on the other side, Kailua, there was a network, and they used to travel across the mountain every other month to see each other. And then at some point, they got a university involved. This is way back too. This is we're talking 10 years ago. They would use virtual platforms. And now everybody's using virtual platforms because it comes naturally. And we have seen a big uptick in collaboration and attendance and a broadening of the base of support, increases in participation by law enforcement and financial services, everybody really. And so there it is, proof positive. People prefer virtual, some in person, and there are benefits to that, perhaps being virtual most of the time and then having an annual celebration in person or a regional conference in person, or however you want to do it. Hybrid can be a little complicated, but we're working that out now because we are emergent from the COVID crisis. And then the mix, there you are. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Thank you for participating with that. So upcoming webinars. Next week, we have Recovering from Elder Financial Exploitation, which was touched upon today. It will feature my colleague Lisa Schifferly, co-lead of this program, Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Networks, with me, and also Hector Ortiz, who is a wonderful researcher who works on our team at the Office for Older Americans, Dr. Hector Ortiz. And they will be providing a look at our new Recovering from Elder Financial Exploitation report. And they will be joined by Dr. Bonnie Olson out of University of Southern California. And she will be talking about some of her research and her work with older people who are recovering from elder financial exploitation. So that should be a really great program. I'm sure it will be. And then, as I mentioned, Money Smart for older adults the following week, March 1, 2 to 3:30 p.m. with, again, Lisa Schifferly, who's the lead of that program from our Office for Older Americans. And then also Ron Haurigi from the FDIC, who is the co-producer and the owner of the Money Smart family of curriculum. But we worked together with them on producing and distributing Money Smart for older adults. So that'll be a walkthrough how-to, and that's coming up March 1. All right, and then some other resources for you. The Office for Older Americans in general, I mentioned this earlier when you saw this link earlier, consumerfinance.gov /older Americans. In addition to all the network materials, we also have lots of resources, say the managing someone else's money suite of resources. Paul held up one of the covers, a red cover, for one of the guides, but there are 4 guides and a considering a financial caregiver guide. And these are guides for financial caregivers on how to manage someone else's money, and then a guide for older people on how to consider who you would choose to manage your money in the event you are unable, and lots of other resources that are all free, can be ordered in bulk. Please order 3-4 weeks in advance. I say maybe even a little more if you can. Think ahead for Older Americans Month and World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. The Money Smart for Older Adults program does not have to be a train the trainer or you training older people. It could be that you just distribute the resource guides, that one of which Paul held up a little while ago. We're out of time. Ask CFPB. I suggest you go in and have a look at that. All things financial questions, Q&A in plain language. For those of you that have older clients, you may wish to help them to submit a complaint, or you may even have a complaint of your own that you wish to submit to the CFPB. But you can submit on behalf of an older person should they have an issue with a financial service or product that we have authority over. And if we don't have authority over the service or product in the complaint, we will make referrals to other agencies who do, such as the SEC, Federal Trade Commission, etc. And if you have further questions, need more information, you can email us directly at eldernetworks@cfpb.gov. So with that, I want to thank you very, very much for your time today, your great questions. I want to thank all the speakers and Paul and our team at ICF, Ben and Nicole, who have produced this event, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.